Hello, everyone. Bonjour à tous. I will start in French for just a second, and then we will pass to English. Welcome, Dr. Haroldo. Thank you so much for being with me today.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me.
I'm really honored to speak about the microbiome and bring this information to French Canada. Even though we're doing this in English, I will be translating a résumé for people that are listening. Donc, rebonjour à tous. Pour ceux qui veulent avoir une version en français, écrivez-moi sous la vidéo et je vais faire mon possible pour vous traduire soit vos questions ou un résumé par la suite. C'est un sujet hyper important pour tout le monde. Ça touche le métabolisme, donc les hommes, les femmes, et particulièrement le métabolisme des estrogènes. Donc, on va adresser aujourd'hui. Donc, thank you so much once again. We are presently live.
Nice.
And some people will be maybe asking questions. We'll see if we have time at the end. We'll start by talking about you, but I'd like to say that I'm very glad that I met you because of courses in the States that push the microbiome to another level. And I believe that you have a lot of experience because you also work for a lab that does microbiome testing, things that we don't necessarily see in conventional medicine where they check more the good bacteria of the gut. So we'll get back to that after if you want maybe to give a little bit resume so people understand how much you have that experience and why we discovered all these patterns that are affected by food.
Yes. Yeah, definitely.
But before, for people that don't know you, would you like to speak a little bit about your practice? At the beginning, you are from Chile, and
I'm from Chile.
before being in functional medicine as a naturopathic physician, you used to be an oral surgeon. So you have a doctor's degree in the dental world and also in periodontal disease. Is that right?
That's right. Yes, I that's my background training. I work in the traditional side for more than 12 years.
Mm-hmm.
And after that, I transitioned. And the reason why I transitioned is because I was struggling trying to heal people,
Mm.
doing what is meant to be done in traditional practice. And it was not working. So of course, I was getting frustrated. I really wanted to find the root cause of all these issues, and that led me to the microbiome, the microbiome training, and the microbiome, of course, learning. And it was still in diapers at that time, and we're still in diapers yet. This is something that is an ongoing. Is an ongoing information that we are getting more and more advances every year. But we have a really good set of tools right now that we can utilize to improve patients' life quality and, of course, the microbiome status. I've been working, I created a company that's called Revolution Gut Health that is dedicated for coaching both professionals and patients that they want to improve their microbiome status and anything that is related to the microbiome. So I'm being dedicated and advocating for this for a long time. I've been testing many people. I've tested more than 2,500 people already for microbiome analysis. I've been working with and collaborating with a lot of physicians, of course, you included. And it has been a fascinating journey. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
really happy to be here, sharing whatever I can regarding this.
Yes. I appreciate so much your passion and we had the chance to collaborate. I have some clients, we say clients here in Quebec, Canada, but patients for you that used your services and the test to verify their microbiome. And it was really surprising and fascinating how these women that do a lot of keto diets for a very long time actually sometimes have issues in their gut. So I can't wait to hear you talk about this. But before, just I think it's important for people to know that your practice with the oral health led you to the microbiome, because a lot of people don't do the link that everything that's happening in our mouth is so connected to our gut and vice versa. So maybe we'll have a chance to speak about that in another podcast, but I just wanted to point that out because sometimes people have gum issues, they have gum infections, or they have like chronic gingivitis, and they don't realize that it can be very, very bad for the rest of the body, and that there's definitely a link. If your gums are not doing well, there's something hiding in your body that you can't see, but that's not doing well as well. So I find it fascinating that it led you to becoming a gut specialist.
Yeah, that they're all connected, and the more we know, the more we connect the dots in terms of the balance and the interaction that is created between the oral microbiome and the gut microbiome. And there's a circle of things that are happening on a constant basis between both two ecosystems, and definitely will be a very interesting conversation we can hop in the next talk. But
Excellent.
they're really connected. It's fascinating.
Super. Yes, definitely. I'd love to talk about this again and how everything is linked. It's so fascinating. So we talked about how you became more specialized in gut health, and the name of your company. Actually, we can put it in the chat.
Mhm.
I don't know if you have access of putting it on your end, or I'll put it for you afterwards.
I
Um,
don't know.
so
Let me
people
see.
can find you easily and follow you on Instagram, because you share some research. Also, for people that prefer LinkedIn, I love the research that you share there as well. So maybe we can start by talking about what happens to the gut microbiome when people start cutting out carbs, whether it be fruit or root vegetables, or even like the bad carbs, of course. Like, we want to get those bad carbs out. We don't want people to eat candy and, like too much ice cream or whatever. But what's the, like right now, the la mode, what's trendy right now is
Yeah.
to cut out too much carbs. And I've seen so many issues, like people that are affecting their thyroid health or their energy levels. And I even see women like actually lose weight when I put back carbs. But today we really want to know what's going on hiding in our gut when those people cut out those fruit and starchy vegetables, or even some of the grains that we often see being taken out. So what can we explain about what's happening negatively in the gut when we stop feeding those bacteria?
Yeah. There's a very important piece of information that is related to those imbalances that are created with extreme diets.
Mm-hmm.
We have different areas in the digestive tract dedicated to different things. So when we cut certain foods that are related to certain metabolic pathways, we're neglecting that part of our body's physiology. In other words, we have a small bowel and we have a large intestine. They do different things. So that's why we have those anatomical differences. In the small bowel, we have a less diversity, less density of microbes, because the idea in the small bowel is that we can absorb nutrients that are directly used by our cells. And that includes proteins and fats altogether.
Mm-hmm.
They're not meant to be used directly by our microbes. Our microbes, they don't need them. I mean, they need them, but not as much as we need them. So we break them down and we absorb them directly so our cells can utilize them in forms of amino acids, or with the saponification of the fats through the bile acids. Those are physiological processes we can use for getting those nutrients inside our body. But then we have all the complex carb realm that is fundamentally avoided in ketogenic diets. And the narrative here is that those nutrients are not utilized by our body, and that's true. We don't use them. But that doesn't mean they're not useful. That's the problem. That's the situation with those type of diets. Yes, our cells don't need them, but our microbes need them. We don't use them, but our microbes rely on them. Actually, 70% of the total population of microbes we have in the body, they're dedicated to ferment complex carbs. So the massive amount of those microbes in the microbiome they need those carbs to survive, and more. We need those carbs to produce by their physiological pathways things that we need to survive and be in optimal health,
Mm-hmm.
which are short-chain fatty acids and neurotransmitters, like to name a few. And of course,
Mm-hmm.
hormones as well, like hormone regulation by production of enzymes from those microbes. If we don't feed them, yes, we can compensate for a certain amount of time, which is the aim of these ketogenic diets. We make some things work to go around the fermentation process coming from the microbes. But that doesn't mean that's going to last or it's going to be optimal forever. You might get some benefits or you might try to cope with those challenges for a certain amount of time. Ultimately, your microbiome diversity and your microbiome metabolic pathways are going to be depressed
Mm-hmm.
and your overall health is going to go lower.
Exactly. Yes, I love the way you say it. So the thing with the ketogenic diet is there's just so many studies about positive effects, and people like find it's a solution for like weight control or weight loss. But when we ask ourselves the right questions and functional questions and global questions, is it normal that someone has to cut so much for so long, or do they have another problem in underneath that we should address without being just on a strict diet forever? Like, to me, a ketogenic diet should be, temporarily, while you're educating the insulin and maybe having an anti-inflammatory effect short term. But if someone needs to stay on ketogenic diet for their lives, and every time they put back carbs they're not tolerating them, maybe there's something wrong that we should address and not leave them on that diet. Is that how you see it as well?
Exactly. So there's a challenge and there's definitely a stress associated, but
Mm-hmm.
that those stressors sometimes are not bad for a short period of time because we're actually training, like you were saying, the body in different pathways. Maybe we're not utilizing those the ketone formation optimally, and we have some insulin resistant issues, and by doing so we are creating that metabolic flexibility that we require for optimizing our physiology or metabolic pathways. But that's
Mm-hmm.
going to be for a certain amount of time because the long term usage of these stressing challenging protocols will lead to imbalances. Again, we stop feeding our microbes, the first thing is going to happen, our microbes are going to start dying, which will going to amplify the die-off reaction. But on the same time, some microbes are going to start using certain structures that prevent for things to come in our body. For example, the mucin 2 layer, which is this sterile layer we have between our gut lining and the lumen of the intestines. And that is a very rich area from proteins. And those glycoproteins can be an alternative food source for these microbes. So whenever they start getting less food, they start using that mucin 2 layer to prevent starvation.
Mm-hmm.
But we're depleting that layer that is incredibly necessary for protecting ourselves. Now,
Mm-hmm.
if we eat that layer, our microbes, they start eating that layer. Then we expose the gut lining, which is very sensitive. And now we have leaky gut. And
Mm-hmm.
now we have translocation of toxins and many other things from the environment inside our body. And they start circulating. So we
Mm-hmm.
raise the endotoxemia levels systemically, and that creates ultimately inflammation, chronic inflammation, which is the root cause of every chronic illness we know. So now you can connect everything that you try to prevent by doing a ketogenic diet. If you do it long term, you're actually triggering mechanisms that can create the main things we're trying to avoid.
Mm-hmm.
It really doesn't make sense. Probably from an evolutionary standpoint, we were in ketosis for a certain amount of time,
Mm-hmm. On and off, right?
on and off. But and that was a necessity more than anything else because we didn't have everything available all the time. We didn't have a grocery store that we could go and get whatever we want from anywhere in the world, and everything was available. So we had that experience with ketosis on a infrequent basis or on and off because of that was needed for keeping us alive.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really good to mimic that to a certain extent.
Yes, to sometimes, cut a lot of carbs and force the body to use, the fats and to be able to adapt to
Exactly.
different types of diets. But it's all a question of balance and what does the person need long term, and maybe what type of gut they had in the first place. Like if a woman is doing the ketogenic diet for weight loss, but she already has maybe issues with her estrogen being not really well recycled, well eliminated, or she has thyroid issues. Well, we don't know. Maybe it's not the right pathway to lose weight to go to the ketogenic diet, right?
Exactly. And there's other things that we are assuming while we're doing this type of diets. We are assuming that our body's pathways are working in a certain way that can sustain the intake of in a large amount or frequently basis of all these nutrients. So for
Mm-hmm.
example, let's say in a ketogenic diet, you will amplify the amount of proteins you're eating on a regular basis, which is almost all the time true. Now you're assuming that you have enough production of enzymes and you have enough production of hydrochloric acid to break down those proteins so that you can utilize them. Same way with the bile production from the
Mm-hmm.
liver and the gallbladder. You're assuming that your flow of bile is efficient enough to take care of the fats. Now, if that assumption is not right, which is actually pretty common to see low efficiency in those pathways for other
Mm-hmm.
reasons, um, then you're not going to be able to break down those proteins or absorb those fats. And now they're going to keep circulating. And with the proteins, you're going to pass them to the later stages of the digestive tract where they're going to get fermented. But now that proteolytic fermentation, that protein fermentation is going to be increased. An increased amount of proteolytic fermentation leads to inflammation.
Mm-hmm.
So we are driving inflammation by eating more proteins that we can physiologically handle. And
Mm-hmm.
the recommendations for ketogenic diets or high protein diets are standard. They don't individualize the needs of proteins. They tell you a certain amount, and that's what people follow. How you
Yeah.
can
So,
tell?
well, sometimes people don't use that much protein in the keto. It depends how strict they
Yeah,
are, because sometimes it's converted to glucose, but they definitely sometimes have a higher ratio, especially if they're doing like low carb paleo. I think they have even more protein than if they're doing a ketogenic diet that's more controlled. Then they won't have too much, but of course it's still going to be a lot of protein without the carbs to balance everything. That I think it affects the pH level in the gut, right?
yeah. The other thing is that when you don't feed your microbes and you are mostly eating proteins and fats, you're restricting the carbs. Other pathways are getting affected, and you become more acidic because you're challenging your body, you're stressing your body.
Mm-hmm.
So when that happens, um, the other part that it gets affected is the regulation of the pH and the oxygen.
Mm-hmm.
To have low oxygen levels in the gut, you need fermentation. Fermentation scavenges, takes out the oxygen because it uses oxygen that is available in the environment. So the more you ferment, more oxygen you use. Therefore, your environmental oxygen drops.
Which
And
is
there's a
what we want, but with the
we want
correct fermentation and not the protein fermentation. So
exactly without the harmful effects of these byproducts from the proteolytic fermentation, because there's a big piece of our microbiome that requires low oxygen levels. They can't handle any other type of oxygen level, and they will start dying or stop
mm-hmm.
growing if we don't keep those oxygen levels in the right place. So
Mm-hmm.
that's another factor. And
Mm-hmm.
then the pH, usually when we are eating more proteins, more fats, drops, and we become more acidic. Now, also there's microbes that are very sensitive to low pH levels. And with that, you will neglect the production of certain byproducts we need. For example, a big one is propionate, which is a very important short chain fatty acid for. This is where the conundrum comes with the weight gain and everything else. is very important for insulin control. So
Well,
propionate
yeah,
actually is one of
that's
the
the
drivers.
thing. Yeah, they're cutting out really even the good carbs, thinking that's what makes them gain weight, but actually they're killing the microbes that actually help them with their metabolism. So we could balance out everything and make them eat more like a moderate diet, and then their metabolism of burning the food because of the help of the microbes would actually help them to lose weight.
Exactly.
Hmm.
So there's a misunderstanding, and definitely there's could be a weight loss in the short run, but it's not sustainable
Hmm.
because of all these issues that I mentioned.
Yes.
And and then when you start neglecting also propionate, you start neglecting a big piece that is needed for your immune system to work properly, which will lead to more inflammatory problems. Which and inflammation is the leading cause of obesity. So again, we come back to the same place. We're neglecting the things that, based on the assumption that those things are making us gain weight, when ultimately those are the factors that are preventing
Hmm.
inflammation and other things to occur, and therefore preventing obesity.
Hmm. Actually, I just want to go back to one term that maybe is uncommon for people that are listening today, the word short chain fatty acid. I just want to explain really quickly that it's a molecule that your gut produces, especially in the lower part, right? Especially in the colon.
Yes.
They will produce its short chain fatty acids, so it's like fuel. Actually, it gives you energy, and it also has properties of healing the gut, anti-inflammatory properties, and those things are produced by your bacteria if you're feeding them the right things, and they eat mostly carbs and fiber, right?
Yes.
Okay,
So
just
there,
want to go back because that term is maybe uncommon for certain people. So I will put that in the chat later for people to maybe look that up. And
yeah,
I also wanted to point out, I see so many people do the keto diet from like Monday to Thursday or Monday to Friday. And then they're like, oh, but I don't do it, I don't do it seriously. I eat carbs, but then the carbs that they choose on the weekend are cheat food. So they're eating the pasta, the white pasta, or the pizza, or the croissant, or the sweets. So in their mind they're like, oh no, I'm moderate, but their moderate choices are not the ones that are helping their microbiome, because they're using cheat foods to compensate with.
yes,
So it's better to actually have moderate all week and then don't have that feeling of having to go to the cheat food because you deprived yourself all week. So people, like, I think people are so scared of potatoes and carrots and all those root vegetables, and I see so many people don't eat fruit anymore, like, because it had such a bad rep with all these low carbs. Like, so do you want to maybe name a few things before going more in the science, just to give them like some easy stuff for a moment, like of what could help the short chain fatty acid, like really quickly? What would your go-to foods be, that to, like, maybe just in a moderate diet where we're not going in excess, but at
yeah.
least putting a little bit of those foods a couple of times a day?
Well, the comprehensive diet will include both worlds. So we want to have those complex carbs in moderation.
Hmm.
Hopefully, and this is a very strong recommendation. I always give. Try to eat as seasonal as possible, because there's a circadian rhythm that the body has and the microbiome has, and understands what's going on in terms of weather and other situations externally, and that actually dictates how they're going to be utilizing more efficiently nutrients. So certain things that could be good in the summer, they're not so good in the winter.
Oh,
So definitely we amplify the consumption of fruits in the summer, and we eat more green leaves and other things on the winter. But we know that mostly all the complex carbs, they can push and getting fermented by microbes in the body that will produce short chain fatty acids. We know lactobacillus species and other bacteria derived from a big group that is called the firmicutes. They produce butyrate, and other ones like bacteroidetes, they produce mostly propionate. But there's a balance. They need different types of nutrients to produce those short-chain fatty acids. So there's not really a 4 or 5 foods that I will point out. I will say that it's about keeping them fed constantly with all the seasonal products we have available. That's what Mother Nature was dictating from all our evolution. But also we have things like, for example, ghee, clarified butter,
Mm-hmm.
that can be tremendously helpful for boosting the butyrate. So we have things that can be
Mm-hmm.
utilized also for producing butyrate. Actually, proteins are not so far away for to be able to produce butyrate as well. We can actually use an alternative route, and from the proteolytic fermentation, we can create butyrate. That's
Okay.
why I was saying that we have that metabolic flexibility. Now, it is more risky because you have more chances of producing these inflammatory byproducts in larger amounts when you're fermenting proteins than complex carbs. But the
Okay.
combination actually makes everything beautiful.
Okay.
Everything works amazing when we have this combination of diets. So the Mediterranean diet for me is, I believe, the best one for the most advanced, like the average type of population. There will
Mm-hmm.
be, I don't think that will apply for tropical weathers, for example, or very cold weathers. We have a different type of microbiome depending on where you live. So that we need to acknowledge. That's why I'm saying seasonal and local is very important, because your microbiome adapts to where you live, and therefore your food should sustain that adaptation. If we start eating mangoes from Africa, that might not be something that your microbiome will understand too much, because it's not adapted to that.
Okay. So for Quebec in the winter, it would be interesting to use more the root vegetables, and of course the greens also can also help. And then all the little fruits like the blueberries that we're so lucky to have here, then you would focus those on a season. You wouldn't necessarily freeze them and use them all year round.
No, I mean, I don't think that there's nothing fundamentally bad by eating them out of season in certain amounts, but we can't base our diet in things that we're importing or we're getting from other sources, other places in the planet, and
Mhm.
sustain a diet that is doesn't change or fluctuates with the seasonal changes. We should
Okay.
be adjusting our diet in terms of what is supposed to be eaten at that time of the year. We can grab a little bit of things that might not be seasonal. I don't think that's going to be a huge impact in our health.
Mm-hmm.
But if we have the same diet all year round, that probably is not the best fit for everyone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, it's nice to vary and to get the things that are more fresh also for more nutrients. That's for sure. Um, if we go back to the question about insulin resistance and the name maybe of the we talked about the name of the process, but the name of the bacteria and how to feed them. So there's certain bacteria also that are fed by fat. So maybe I wanted to go in that area and explain. So when they're doing a ketogenic diet for a long time,
Mhm.
we're not feeding the microbes that are helping our insulin management, but we're feeding the ones that actually eat fat. So that was something that I learned through you. We don't think about microbes eating fat. So, but there are some microbes that actually thrive on fat, but then they become problematic because they cause inflammation, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, there's some microbes that they adjusted themselves to utilize certain saturated fats, and also they can survive on those areas that are mostly when fats are mostly present, which is
Mm-hmm.
certain stages of the small bowel. And we have bacteria like Bilophila whitworthia or B. Bacteroides fragilis, which they become bile resistant, and they actually thrive on saturated fats, which is not a bad thing, again, in certain degree of balance. But because of the nature of these microbes, and they're gram negative, both of them, and that could be many others, by the way, but those are the probably two of the most significant ones. Because of the nature of these microbes, we if we overfeed them, they can actually lead to inflammation, and that's usually a positive indicator that we have an imbalance in our diet. If
Mm-hmm.
we have much of them, if we have too much abundance of those microbes, maybe we're eating too much saturated fats. Maybe we have a low efficiency in our liver pathways, in our gallbladder efficiency. Maybe we are eating poor quality fats as well. Maybe we need more omega-3s than omega-6. Maybe we have an imbalance there.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of things that could be affecting and creating this overabundance. So these are markers we can analyze. That's why microbiome testing can be very useful, because when we start correlating what will be the causative agent of that overgrowth, and we can correct that from the dietary standpoint, then we can
Mm-hmm.
do a lot of good things for our microbiome in general.
Yeah, and it's really fascinating. It's really fascinating that um, the clients that had you in common, when you looked at their results of the microbiome, you could almost tell that she was on a ketogenic diet or not.
Yeah.
So that was pretty fascinating.
Yeah,
And
it's interesting actually.
those
I,
those women oftentimes have what we call estrogen dominance, which is a term which is very controversial because it depends how you're explaining it. Some people say estrogen dominance doesn't exist. That's if you're looking just in the blood. Some people say that estrogen dominance is just a lack of progesterone, but I look at estrogen dominance at another way, because there's the way the body transforms estrogen and eliminates it in the toilet. So I speak about this all the time, and I tell people that estrogen dominance to me is more the metabolites of estrogen, because it's not just in the blood. It's really what's happening once your body uses it and gets rid of it, because we have to get rid of estrogen metabolites. Once they're used up every day, they become like a toxin. So maybe I'd like to spend a little time explaining how the gut microbiome, so how those good bugs or the bad bugs influence estrogen metabolism. And I know some people that are listening are going to say, oh, this is just for women. No, because actually men can have this issue too. And if you have too much estrogen or too much toxic estrogen as a man, it's going to also influence your testosterone. So it's for everyone. So since everyone has a microbiome, I think everyone should be listening to this part as well. Do you
yes.
want to explain maybe what's happening with those bugs? And some people have read about the enzyme that causes reabsorption of the estrogen, which is called B-glucuronidase. I'm going to put that in the chat so people can understand that word.
Yeah, definitely. the So we have something that's called the strobolome, and the strobolome is a subset inside the microbiome that comprises a lot of different types of microbes. We have
Mhm.
firmicutes there. We have lactobacillus, which are pretty famous. Bifidobacterium. We have vertical microbia. We have ruminococcus. There's multiple types of families included in that set of microbes that we label as the strobolome. And the, ultimately, the role of them is producing enzymes. Uh, in, the main one will be beta glucuronidase,
Mhm.
though that are related to recycling process of estrogens. We know, and you know way more than me in this topic, that the pathways for metabolizing and excreting both endogenous and exogenous types of estrogens, they go through the liver, and we have to go through methylation and process, and we have to go through the whole detoxification phases to eliminate them out of the body. But there's a possibility that those conjugated and methylated estrogens are open up and become useful for being recycled using that enzymatic pathway that is produced by those microbes. So when they did studies about markers, when they use markers, radioactive markers for tracing the estrogen pathways and seeing where they were going, expecting those are going to be properly eliminated from in the stools, they were tracking them, and surprisingly, 68% of them were actually coming back to circulation. And that was because there was probably a combination of an inefficient detoxification process mediated by the liver, and also an amplification in the production of that beta-glucuronidase enzyme
Mm-hmm.
related to the recycling process. And that makes us understand two things. Toxins and hypertoxicity can lead to impairment in the metabolic pathways of the liver, which will block the ability or affect the ability of the body to efficiently eliminate the excess amount of estrogen out of the body, but also that the microbiome balance is crucial for maintaining healthy levels of estrogen, but also will have implications in the progesterone levels and testosterone, as you were mentioning. So this applies for both men and women. And also, of course, the immune system is related to this. So if your estrogen levels are off, your immune system is not going to be working properly. So we know everything is connected. And,
Yeah.
and that's why it's so important to have a properly balanced microbiome. And all these species that I just mentioned, they're all fed by mainly one thing, complex carbs. So going back to the ketogenic diet, yes, they might help at the beginning, but later on, you're going to deplete those populations that are related to the recycling and the optimal utilization of estrogen.
Mm-hmm.
So there's
Yes.
a lot of connected dots there.
It's very intense. Thank you so much for sharing that. That's really precious information. There's so many people out there that are struggling with all these symptoms of estrogen dominance, and right now there's a big trend of just adding bioidentical hormones as if it's like miraculous. But if you're not taking care of your liver, and if you're not taking care of your gut, and if you're not eating those good foods for your good microbes, these people end up in our offices and they don't know what's going on. They're not tolerating the hormones and they're not doing well. They're gaining weight. And well, maybe that's why they didn't start at the right place. I have nothing against, some women really need bioidentical hormones, but some don't, especially when they're in the beginning of their 40s. I find it so sad. They're jumping to hormones without even taking care of the basic stuff, which is the microbiome and all the digestion. So maybe if we can give just a little tips of people. You said complex carbs. Of course, we got to help those people digest them. So that's the role of the naturopath or the physician or the nutritionist that's listening. But what can be done if someone has too much of that enzyme? So what's increasing the big glucuronidase? Like, is it more like someone that took too many antibiotics, or is it really a lack of those carbs? Or like, what would be your first go-tos to help wean down that enzyme?
Actually, all you mentioned, antibiotics, antimicrobials in general, they do create harm on the microbiome related to those pathways.
Okay.
All these contraceptive pills with synthetic estrogens, actually, they do have a negative effect on the strobilome, and they
Mhm.
do amplify imbalanced processes in the recycling of estrogen, and also the way we manage estrogen in the liver
Mhm.
and systemically generally. The poor diets, imbalanced diets, or long-term extreme diets, they do tend to imbalance the microbiome, and therefore as well the management of all these enzymes and the recycling of estrogen. The xenoestrogens that we can find in so many places, those also are very damaging for the microbiome and all the estrogen pathways. And
So those are the plastics and the molecules that come from a
exactly.
synthetic perfume that mimic estrogen, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
And ultimately, like in a broad spectrum layer, in that same topic, toxins in general. And we have right now, we're dealing with a tremendous amount of toxins in the world that were not found 100 years ago or 80 years ago. Our grandmas, they never dealt with the amount of toxins we're dealing on a daily basis. That
Mm-hmm.
increases our toxic burden. And that challenges our body to be able to eliminate those toxins efficiently. And in some cases, that can lead to blockages and impairment in the function of those support organs that are so necessary for maintaining homeostasis in our endocrine system.
Mm-hmm.
So I believe that the main strategies I can just mention, besides, of course, diet, will be supporting our microbiome. I love spore-based probiotics because I think those are regulatory agents that were found naturally on soil, and now we're trying to mimic that soil intake process that we don't do anymore because nobody's eating soil. But we can mimic a little bit that with using spore-based probiotics. Um, Also, the other thing is exercising, especially outdoors. The gym is nice. Don't get me wrong, I like gyms, but nothing will mimic running or walking outdoors in the woods or by the beach or whatever your place is close
Mm-hmm.
to, and we can grab a tremendous amount of microbes from the environment. And
Just by breathing them in.
yeah, the
Mm-hmm.
nasal and the airways plus the gut are the two main pathways we use for inoculation of microbes. Those are our
Mm-hmm.
primary ways of getting bacteria, and bacteria are 99% of them are good. We need them.
Mm, interesting.
And
So yeah, people that run on a treadmill when they could be running outside, especially if they have a park or if they have a woods somewhere, that's definitely something. So they can keep the gym for the weights, but they should do their cardio outside.
exactly. And the last is do a proper detox, um, hopefully on a regular basis. So first of all, choose things that can improve your detoxification.
Mm-hmm.
We know that there's many things, even in foods, that we can use for improving detox, like
Mm-hmm.
turmeric, ginger, all the bitter tasting vegetables, artichoke, some botanicals and herbs. We can use them also for the same purpose, and combined to that, we can use chlorella and we can use other things that combine toxins on a daily basis. Some
Mm-hmm.
people, unfortunately, they need more intense detoxification strategies, and that can be actually one of the biggest pieces to address when we have these type of imbalances, because toxins will lead to an imbalanced terrain, and an imbalanced terrain will never grow a balanced microbiome. So
So many things are connected. Yes, thank you for relating that. Yeah, and someone that has too many toxins, and if they're recirculating and reabsorbing their estrogen, that's just adding on the burden of a body that's already overwhelmed and already fatigued. So definitely, yeah, taking care of detox with foods, or like professional products that actually do a real detox. So be careful out there what you choose. You need a company that's reliable and has actually done testing on seeing the efficiency, and is the detox product really supporting all the pathways and those two liver
yeah,
those two liver steps. I mean, there's two parts, of course. So for some people that maybe are not aware of this, I have an article. It's in French, but for my French crowd here, I'll put that in the chat for later references. Thanks so much for that. So we have just a couple of minutes to wrap up.
mhm,
I have maybe a question for you. If someone wants to start putting carbs again, we're talking about complex carbs. More people will maybe gain fat easier with like everything that's in the grain family, especially rice, which is very rich. So do you have like maybe a preference? Like, would you tell them to put fruit back first or root vegetables first? What's your go-to if we're going step by step, if they want to go slowly and like train their body to tolerate carbs again because they've been maybe on a keto diet for too long? Do you have
yeah.
what would be the difference for the microbiome if you're doing more the fruit than the root vegetables? Is there a big difference to you, or is it maybe in the same category?
There's a certain differences, but that's going to be a little bit of a longer conversation.
Okay.
But I will say for now that when people, they tend to gain weight by eating normal amounts. Of course, if you eat a lot, like everything else, you're going to go to an extreme. But if you have challenges by eating normal amounts of carbs, I recommend using first polyphenol rich fruits, especially berries, which you have a lot in Quebec, and I
Yes.
know that's
We have
beautiful.
cranberries.
Oh, you have such a beautiful food there. I miss it. When I've been there, and really, I really never forgot about the amazing food. what you have. But cranberries and any berries, real berries, not strawberries or not, but everything
Yes,
else.
strawberries, like they put them in berries, but when people buy those mixes, they should really focus on cranberries, blueberries. I think there's the mulberries, and which other one
Raspberries.
would you put in there?
Yeah, the berries, they have a lot of polyphenols, which we know they have a regulatory effect on the microbiome. So they actually can regulate the FB ratio, and that ratio is associated in a certain degree with obesity, because firmicutes, they can harvest a lot of calories out of fiber. So they might increase the insulin levels and the glycemic response we're getting from those foods. But when we balance them out, we don't get the same response. And
Okay.
we know those polyphenols can be helpful. So that's one of my introductory carbs. And the other thing I always recommend, get things that are hopefully the least processed possible. Wash them yourself. Don't buy those triple washed vegetables. They're loaded with chlorine, by the way. You want to get something that has the most amount of enzymes
Yeah.
included. So the more local the
Yeah.
vegetable is, more chances that vegetable will have naturally occurring enzymes that will optimize digestion and ultimately the way your body responds to that type of food.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's not the food itself, it's how the body can handle that.
Yes, and thank you for mentioning that. Like, no, like pre-washed carrots, please. Buy local carrots when you can, and actually don't peel them off. Like people are scared because they seem dirty. I have been not peeling my carrots forever because there's actually more fiber, and you can actually get some of the good bacteria from the soil that's actually left in those little lines.
Yes.
So don't be afraid to
No.
eat more. I say in French sauvage, like, like our ancestors. And actually, like, I'm surprised when people peel carrots now. I'm like, no, keep it. Like, to me, it's just a basic. I've been doing it for so long, but thanks for mentioning that. Yeah.
Of course.
And actually, carrots have been studied for estrogen clearance and helping the liver. So it's really interesting
Oh,
to
well,
maybe put that as a top food for today.
I didn't know that. That's I learned something. It's great.
So thank you so much for your time. We'll give the website if people want to reach out. Can you help people even if they're in Canada? Can they reach out for you and your team?
Yeah, I have people that I'm seeing from Canada as well. So everything I do is remotely, and that's I can help with a lot of these microbiome imbalances. So my pleasure if anyone's interested.
Great news. Thank you so much for your time, and I'd love to have you again. We need to talk about the mouth. We
Yeah.
could actually, there's so much to say. So thanks for your generous time.
No,
Have a
thank you
great
so much
day.
for inviting me. Thank you,
Have a
you
good
too.
day in New York.
Thank you. Very
Thank
rainy
you.
here today.
Oh, okay, well, it's a good day. It's a good day to work then.
Yep, definitely.
Take
Thank you
care.
so much for the invitation. Take care. Bye
Thank you.
bye.
You too. Bye bye.